An old occupation. Vertical line. What happens when people of different occupations get old? Old accountants never die, they just lose their balance. Old actors never die, they just drop apart. Old archers never die, they just bow and quiver. Old architects never die, they just lose their structures. Old bankers never die, they just lose interest. Old basketball players never die, they just go on dribbling. Old beekeepers never die, they just buzz off. Old bookkeepers never die, they just lose their figures. Old bosses never die, much as you want them to. Old cashiers never die, they just check out. Old chauffeurs never die, they just lose their drive. Old chemists never die, they just fail to react. Old cleaning people never die, they just kick the bucket. Old cooks never die, they just get deranged. Old daredevils never die, they just get discouraged. Old deans never die, they just lose their faculties. Old doctors never die, they just lose their patience. Old electricians never die, they just lose contact. Old farmers never die, they just go to seed. Old garagemen never die, they just retire. Old hackers never die, they just go to bits. Old hardware engineers never die, they just cash in their chips. Old hippies never die, they just smell that way. Old horticulturists never die, they just go to pot. Old hypochondriacs never die, they just lose their grip. Old investors never die, they just roll over. Old journalists never die, they just get depressed. Old knights in chainmail never die, they just shuffle off their metal coils. Old laser physicists never die, they just become incoherent. Old lawyers never die, they just lose their appeal. Old limbo dancers never die, they just go under. Old mathematicians never die, they just disintegrate. Old milkmaids never die, they just lose their way. Old ministers never die, they just get put out to pasture. Old musicians never die, they just get played out. Old number theorists never die, they just get past their prime. Old numerical analysts never die, they just get disarrayed. Old owls never die, they just don't give a hoot. Old pacifists never die, they just go to pieces. Old professors never die, they just lose their class. Old photographers never die, they just stop developing. Old pilots never die, they just go to a higher plane. Old policemen never die, they just cop out. Old preachers never die, they just rattle on, and on, and on, and on. Old printers never die, they're just not the type. Old programmers never die, they just branch to a new address. Old programming wizards never die, they just recurse. Old quarterbacks never die, they just pass away. Old schools never die, they just lose their principles. Old sculptors never die, they just lose their marbles. Old seers never die, they just lose their vision. Old sewage workers never die, they just waste away. Old skateboarders never die, they just lose their bearings. Old sailors never die, they just get a little woozy. Old soldiers never die, young ones do. Old steel makers never die, they just lose their temper. Old students never die, they just get degraded. Old tanners never die, they just go into hiding. Old typists never die, they just lose their justification. Walt Disney didn't die. He's in suspended animation. Old whitewater rafters never die, they just get disgorged. Old wrestlers never die, they just lose their grip.